Hello there, everybody. Hey, we're back today talking a little bit about Scotland and England. You guys know I've been on my channel here covering, Indie Ref, Brexit, and the recent UK general elections. So I've been watching and following along with this now for a few months. Obviously, I'm over here in the States, but I've been watching and absorbing a great deal of information and the thing is when I first came into this, I mean, I saw that there were Scots calling for independence, like that they wanted independence from the UK and Westminster. And I mean, I don't disagree. I didn't disagree with it at the time, but I did have concerns because I'm a type of person that look before you leap. You know, don't just don't just don't just willy nilly jump and because you can oftentimes find yourself jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, right? So I obviously came in with an objective point of view and wanted to evaluate what was really going on. I quickly learned that you know Scotland was not this poor beggarly nation that I kind of always thought it was, or always got an impression that it was, I should say. Got an impression of that from UK media, and I'm beginning to realize that it's UK media that had left me with that impression. But in looking into it, Scotland is very rich. It's and the Scottish Parliament have been doing a great job of building renewable energy and those sort of things. And Scotland is in a great position to be able to provide for itself. It has a pretty huge abundance of natural resources. It's there's a lot of reasons why Scotland isn't beggarly and poor. So that's just not true. It's not a fact. So these are things that I started to learn, right? And as I've been going, coming along in this and learning more and more about this, and realizing that it's the SNP in Scotland that's really making this happen, because they are the ones that the Scottish people have been voting for in Scotland, and the SNP are running the Scottish Parliament, right? So that's who the Scots are voting in as their representatives in Scotland. And they're the ones that are, like I said, pushing for renewable energy. They're trying to get Scotland set up to where Scotland can stand on its own. They've done a massive great things with the NHS there in Scotland. I mean, there's a lot of things that in Scotland, for instance, because I have friends there that obviously can attest to this. When you go to the doctor in Scotland, you only have to wait a couple days, not a month, like you do down in England, right? Did you go see the general practitioner, right? And things like getting your prescriptions in Scotland, your prescriptions are free. That's what the Scottish Parliament is doing. They're doing a lot of good things to improve the lives of the Scottish people in real life, in their daily lives. These are the types of things that the Scottish Parliament is doing. They want their population to be healthy and get healthy. That's kind of the message that really I think they're sending with making that available to the Scottish people. So there's a lot of great things that the SNP is doing. And I know a lot of people out there hate the SNP. I get it, but we'll get into the reasons why people hate the SNP at some later date. But I'll accept the fact that there are people out there that hate the SNP, but they don't ever really have very many good reasons for why. But maybe that'll change here in the future. Maybe somebody will step up and actually, have some criticisms that aren't overshadowed by worse behavior in Westminster. You know what I mean? And because when it comes down to it, a lot of the things that get referenced and a lot of the things that people complain and attack the SNP, I assure you there's much worse things than those things they're attacking going on in their own parties in Westminster. And so that's another part of this that's very interesting. But to get to the point of this particular video, we're going to be talking about another one of the claims. As I've been coming along in this little journey and absorbing all this information, I know that I heard during the elections and all that stuff, watching all the Good Morning, Britain and ITV and various interviews with the politicians and listening to all the things and, absorbing all this. One of the things that I kept hearing is that they kept trying to tar the SMP, basically tar and feather them. They were trying to disgrace them or whatever in interviews and in things like that by bringing up the fact that there had been some child deaths in a couple hospitals in Scotland, right? Which is tragic. Don't get me wrong. Child deaths are obviously not a good thing, but I would like to remind everybody that hospitals are hospitals. Okay, number one, you're generally in a hospital because you're in a weakened state. Not only that, but hospitals are where superbugs can end up emerging because it's a clean atmosphere and that sort of thing, and certain viruses can become resistant to certain antibiotics and that sort of thing or whatever, right? So it's hospitals have a problem of, there's a lot of sick people there, so therefore, risk of infection and things like that are higher in a hospital, even though it's a place where you go to get well. It's important to realize that that's what's going on in hospitals. Hospitals are a place where people are a place where people go when they're sick, right? So there's always going to be a chance of being, contracting something when you go to a hospital. It's just something to look out for. That's why they always have the sterilizing gel now when you go to hospitals and visit people at a hospital. Pretty much almost at everywhere you turn on the wall, they have those little things that dispense the antibacterial gel. That's because they're trying to prevent infection from being able to move and spread and all that sort of stuff. That's what that's there for. So those are the types of things but they don't put those, they put those things there for a reason, folks. They put that there. They started putting that antibacterial gel everywhere for a reason. because they knew the way infection can spread, right? So I just want to keep that in mind. Now, it is unfortunate that this happened in Scotland, but what I'm going to show you right now is an article. And we're going to come back afterwards, but I want to say this right now. When these child deaths happened in Scotland, they were calling for the health minister's head to roll. The Scottish Conservatives were saying she should step down or be sacked. Okay, that's what the Scottish Conservatives were saying. The Scottish Labour, was coming out against her, and it was getting, they were all just jumping all over her. And like I say, calling for her head, her resignation or for her to be sacked. Okay, that's what they're calling for. This very extreme thing, and I want to put this in perspective here, folks. We're talking about, I think, 4 or 5 children. Okay. Now we're going to show you an article, and this is going to illustrate what's going on down in England. And you're going to see what's going on there, and then it's interesting to look at the way the BBC reports for England and Westminster, and the way it reports for Scotland, and the very, very clear difference in how it does that. So that's what we're going to be looking at here, folks. All right, we'll see you in a minute. Okay, and here's an article to illustrate, the difference of how things get reported in England and how things get reported in Scotland. So, this has to do with multiple child deaths in another Queen Elizabeth hospital, but neither the BBC England or the HM opposition even think to blame the Tory health minister. Now, that's interesting when you see the way things go when when one baby was died of an infection in a Glasgow hospital, to understand the contrast of it, right? So nobody thinks to call out the Tory health minister essentially for this stuff. So here you can see are 4 different articles where they talk about these deaths, but what they don't do is they don't talk about the health minister and what potential liability or responsibility he has or would have, or So here we go. The BBC discovered at least 7 preventable deaths since 2016, and 4 further families have now spoken out saying their babies would have died if medics had provided their babies would not have died if medics had provided better care. But all the government need to do is to receive the healthcare safety branch's report into the 25 cases later, as well as a care quality commission report from an inspection carried out in January. Also, in 2 of the cases, the mothers said the actions of the trust left them feeling they were to blame for their babies' deaths. That's how we're running things down in England? That's English NHS? You made the mothers feel like it was their fault? That's pretty low and despicable. That is, yeah. That is, yeah. Wow. That really, I mean, you got to be a real special kind of person to do that. And to do that to grieving mothers. Wow. Especially when it's obvious here from the investigation that it wasn't the mother's fault. Yeah. That's low down, despicable. Yeah. Can you imagine what Lisa Summers might make of the above? Can you see the tear-sodden extended interviews so close that you can see the tears? Can you guess just how many days the story would be extended over? 7 more? In the 4 English reports above, there is not one mention of the health secretary by name, and certainly no suggestion that he might be responsible or, don't be daft, resign. There is no interview with an opposition politician where they might be allowed to rant and to demand that heads must roll. It occurs to neither the BBC nor the opposition to politicize these tragedies. They know the health board is responsible. So that's interesting, right? Because what they're saying is that in these news stories, nobody went to the opposition to get their opinion on it, so that because obviously it's going to be the opposition who's going to be outraged and make a more of a fuss about it. So the fact that these articles aren't asking anybody from the opposition and they're basically just reporting them, which is their right. But what you're going to find out here is just like you see written right there, right? But in Scotland, okay? Now, I want to point out a couple things here. This is multiple deaths, okay? And there has been an investigation. There's a healthcare safety branch report, and there is a care quality commission report that will attest to this, obviously. So, but in Scotland, a call for heads to roll over the Edinburgh Children's Hospital delay. Jean Freeman did not make child infection death public, but they didn't hesitate calling out and asking for heads to roll when it comes to the SNP in Scotland. It happens all too easily there, right? And you can see that there's not nearly as many cases of these child deaths and that sort of stuff in Scotland. We had multiple, at least, they said at least 7, and 4 more families have come out since. So it could even be higher than 7 in England. And so it's interesting that nobody in England, after that many, nobody is calling out the health minister there to say, hey, what's going on here? Why are we having so many babies and young kids die in our hospitals? What's going on with that? What's happening here? Are we looking into the cause of that? Is anybody doing that? So, yeah, it's amazing. So, this is an editorial policy and a culture among reporters in BBC Scotland, which may damage the SNP far more than any sex scandal could, and it should be called out by the leadership. So this is something I've been noticing, obviously, since I've been following UK politics and Scottish independence and Brexit. And something I've been noticing is that the politicians in Westminster are always quick to say how Scotland's NHS they need to work on their NHS, or they need to do whatever with their NHS. They have a better NHS than England does. And to suggest 1 or 2 deaths in Scotland when you had more than at least 7 in England, yeah, I mean it's obvious to see. And I guess what's really sad here is that it's not just that Westminster is obviously disingenuous about things here, but clearly the BBC is just towing their line. They're basically just polishing Westminster's knob, you know? Because why wouldn't you want to find out why this is happening? Why wouldn't you be calling out the people that you think are most potentially responsible or able to do something about it? Why wouldn't you be calling those people out? Yeah, it's just amazing to me. But let one baby or let one thing happen in Scotland, no problem. They'll call out everybody they want to as long as they're SNP. Yeah, that's the reality of it. So, in all the time that I've been following this, I kept hearing this coming from Westminster MPs about Scotland and everything. So when I saw today the article where the problem was worse in England, that just really just kind of was... For me, this is a perfect example of what I mean when I say there's just disingenuous dialogue or disingenuous things coming out of Westminster, because this is a perfect example. They don't treat it the same way. They're quick to call for heads to roll if it's an SNP MP. Okay? They're always quick to do that. But if it's another MP, if it's obviously a Tory MP who's the health minister health minister right now over in Westminster, right? So obviously nobody's calling for his head to roll. I don't even know if anybody's even asking him what's going on. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just when you see the difference in the reporting and you realize that it is the British media as well. It's the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, is obviously coloring their reporting. It's obvious. It's true. I mean, you can see it right there. They're not, you don't see them, they're not, obviously they went in Scotland and talked to the opposition. Okay? And everything, and that's why they say they're calling for heads to roll and all that stuff in the Scottish articles that you saw that I just put up, right? But nothing like that in the ones from England. Just about, an investigation into the cause of this and that or whatever. Families are upset. Never any of those articles did any of those articles even mention the health minister. Okay? They didn't even mention him or her. It's a complete afterthought. But let it happen in Scotland, and they'll immediately start calling for heads to roll. And that's the media. Right? So, I want to go ahead and share with you a little bit of what happened here with the health minister in Scotland, who had to deal with these deaths at the Queen Elizabeth Glasgow Hospital. Okay, so the health secretary in Scotland issues apology over the child deaths at the Glasgow Hospital. Gina Freeman expressed her deepest sympathies to the families of Millie Main, 10, and a 3-year-old boy. The 2 children died 3 weeks apart in August of 2017 at the hospital, which is part of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus. They have been treated on a ward which was affected by contamination. Water was affected by water contamination. Right? It ended up there was somehow pigeon feces, some fungus from pigeon feces, was getting into the water, apparently. That's what they discovered eventually because they were conscientious about it and figured it out so that they didn't end up with, a pile of dead bodies. They didn't want that, so they got to the bottom of it quick. On Monday, the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde apologized for the distress it caused parents. Really point out here is some of the things being said by other MPs, right? So Labour Party's Monica Lennon asked for the health secretary, who the parents of the sick children should put their trust in. Who the parents of the sick children should put their trust in. Ms. Freeman replied, "They can place trust in me. I have compassion, I have empathy, and that is why I met with those families and have undertaken work that I have done. I refute absolutely from Miss Lennon or from anyone else that I am careless or irresponsible on these matters. It could not be further from the truth. It may suit you, Miss Lennon, to make these points for other reasons, but they are not true, and I refute them absolutely." Scottish Conservatives. Health spokesman Miles Briggs called on Miss Freeman to resign or be sacked. I guarantee you they wouldn't have done that if it was their own health minister. But it's SMP, remember? So the heads must roll. Let's see. He said, "At the heart of this scandal, we must never forget our grieving families who are completely unsatisfied and think there has been a cover-up, and who can blame them." Well, it looks to me like the health minister is pretty actively doing something about it, meeting with the families and those sort of things. So, yeah. So that's the kind of thing. They're always looking to tar and feather the SMP, but let someone in one of their own in their own party do it, and it's like no big deal. They'll even reinstate you for a confidence vote. So, this is one of the things that I've been noticing, that these politicians in the UK regarding Scotland have been saying about Scotland. I mean, I'm not kidding, that they still to this day. I mean, I just played a clip in an interview the other day of a guy who was talking about how beggarly impoverished that Scotland is. Scotland don't got no money, he said, and all the things that guy was saying. It's just not true. So anyway, hopefully eventually people are going to become educated on what's actually happening, and they're not going to be listening to obviously BBC, because obviously the BBC is very much slanted and in Westminster's pocket, because they're even tar and feathering the SNP for Westminster. So that's pretty sad. All right, okay. Just wanted to point out, folks, that Glasgow, Scotland has had a couple problems and some unfortunate deaths with children in a couple hospitals, but there's been far more in England, obviously, from what we've learned today. And when it comes down to it, the Scottish NHS is doing a great job. They're getting people in quicker to see the doctor. They are getting the Scottish people their medication and prescriptions for free, because they want the Scottish people to be well and healthy and happy, right? So these are the things that's happened. These are the things that are happening in the Scottish NHS, and this is the things that the SNP and the Scottish Parliament are doing. So when you hear another Westminster MP talk about how the Scottish Parliament needs to do its day job, you can tell them where to stick it, right? Okay, folks, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.